All right, Cameron. Cameron, where are you from originally? Where'd you grow up?
I was born in Anchorage, Alaska,
Really?
and lived there for a few years, then moved to North Carolina, back to Alaska, out of Alaska, Minnesota, Orange County, LA, Denver, back to LA, and now I'm here.
And tell me about your childhood, your family.
My early childhood was really tumultuous. My mom and dad were high school sweethearts. He was captain wrestling team. She was, I think voted most kind or best smile. I don't know. They were a couple years apart. And my earliest memories of them are them fighting. I have a very vivid memory of my dad, Roger, having my mom pinned against the fridge and their fists banging against each other like drums. And I know that they probably weren't that succinct or that structured of hits, but that's how my mind remembers them. And I remember breaking into tears and screaming for them to stop. And then they did, and my dad got in my face and yelled at the top of his lungs, "Stop crying," which is something that he did quite a bit. And my mom did too in her own way, but never that intensely. Then he dragged her in the bedroom and I heard a bunch of more noise. And then he came out, I don't know how long or later, but he picked me up and I was in the same spot on the floor crying. And I remember him trying to console me. But I knew that moment I didn't like my dad. I was my mom's kid. That's how I always felt. And I knew that no matter what he said in that moment, he couldn't fix that. There was a lot more fighting and split ups and then back together and moving out and then moving back. And I mean, we must have done the dance from Eagle River, Alaska, where the trailer was that we lived in, to I think probably my grandparents' house or my mom's friend's house multiple times. Finally, she left him. She got custody. He had visitation rights. And it was me and my mom. We were on welfare. She was working her ass off to put food on the table. But I never felt in need of or a lack of. My mom came from a childhood where she was the last of 9 to very dysfunctional, alcoholic, addict parents and siblings. And the one thing she wanted to make sure of when she had a kid was that they always felt safe and nurtured and cared for and loved. And that's what she did, even when we were broke.
Were you the only child?
Yes, at that point, yes. In fact, I am my mom's only child she ever gave birth to. And I'm the oldest and the only boy. When my mom remarried my stepdad, not remarried, when she married my stepdad, he did have a daughter who was much, much older, going into college. So we had that brother-sister dynamic, but it was never really easy or comfortable. She had a lot of feelings around our father and her mother getting divorced, rightfully so. And then it was just me, my stepdad, David, and my mom for many, many years. I hated him at first. I thought he smelled bad. I was the man of the house. I was in charge. Who the fuck is this? But at some point he won me over. I think mostly because I saw how much my mom loved him and I wanted my mom to be happy. But, I went in and out of some pretty severe depressions around that time. We moved to North Carolina after he proposed so that he could continue to go to school. He was a doctor. He was becoming a more specialized kind of doctor. He wanted to do high-risk terminal pregnancies. He wanted to really be there and make a difference in these women's lives. I remember the wedding. I remember moving to North Carolina. I don't remember, feeling particularly happy to be there. I don't remember going into my first depression, and for many years I didn't remember the sexual assault that happened at that time in my life, nor did I understand that my mother's bipolar was kind of coming into full swing. There would be times when mom was gone visiting my aunt, and I had my stepdad just trying his best to go be in school, to be a resident and to be a doctor, and me being in a new state with no friends and trying to manage. But yeah, it wasn't a particularly happy time. I also was unable to read or write at that point in my life. I was severely behind in school, which didn't help with the teasing. It didn't help with feeling different then. I already felt effeminate and not like other boys my age, and didn't get along with a lot of my peers, no matter where I was at. So not being able to read and write also made it worse. It's having the means to, like having my dad, my stepdad, who was a very educated man, have the means to look at me and witness that there was something different about me, and instead of shaming me for it or making me feel worse, helping me figure out what it was. We did some tests, and I was diagnosed with some severe learning differences, and luckily we got me the right tutoring and the stuff I needed to be able to actually learn to read and process information. So I feel very grateful for that. But at that time in my life, I was diagnosed, in addition to being dyslexic and have an auditory deficit disorder, I was diagnosed with bipolar, depression, anxiety, and ADD. And they put me on intense pharmaceutical meds to manage all that. I was just a kid, I look back on it and I wonder, did it help me? Did it not help me? I've had these diagnoses taken back so many times and then given to me so many times, especially in and out of my relapse cycles. Once we got out of North Carolina, I also started gaining a lot of weight. I became pretty obese as a child. My height kept shooting me up. But then my food intake would, catch up to my height, and it was just kind of this really intense cycle of, not being able to feel good in my body. I remember we moved back to Alaska, and I was going to school. And I was happier. I was happier at this point. I don't know if it was because I was back in Alaska, or if because, at that point my mom had gotten on meds and my dad was no longer in school. He was working. It just felt more structured and safe. But I remember feeling happier. But in school, again, I was having social issues. If I wasn't being called gay, I was being called fat. I remember learning at this point in my life that the best way to combat not being liked was to make sure you liked me by giving you something. And whether it was me demeaning myself and making fun of myself, or me getting my mom to bring McDonald's to the class, or me giving you my toys, or whatever it was, I needed you to like me. I needed to feel safe in whatever situation I was, and I equated safety with the validation of people liking me. At this time in my life, I've had some weird moments sexually as a kid, as a child.
The sexual assault that you talked about?
Well, it started, the first thing I remember is being 2 or 3. And this is the first time I remember sexually. I was basically playing mommy and daddy with a girl from my preschool. Like, she came over, we were having a play date. I fully initiated us getting completely naked and playing mommy and daddy in my bedroom. And my mom walking in at some point, horrified, absolutely horrified, and like separating us. And of course that little girl could never come over again. And, you know, my mom is not one to shame me for things, but she was definitely very, very disturbed. And rightfully so. I mean, I don't know what I would think if I walked in on my kid doing that, but to me it seemed normal at that age. I also initiated things with my cousins. And I never knew why. You know, you hear that old adage like, oh, kids experiment, kids, you know, explore their bodies. And I do think that's true, but I had almost like a weird obsession around it. Many years later, I, through some brain spotting therapy that I was getting at a rehab I was at, I had this memory come back. And I'd always had the core memory. I had this preschool teacher named Mr. Durkee. And he was like God to me. Like, I idolized this man. And I just remember one day, randomly, him taking me to his apartment and putting me in his room on his bed and handing me this stuffed seal toy plushie that, like, I had that thing forever. I loved that toy. And that's all I remembered for years. And I never thought anything weird of it. Always just assumed my mom knew about it. It wasn't until later in therapy and talking with her that she was like, I would never have let you go. Like, I don't know why you would have been there. And then through, you know, trauma therapy, which has really been a lifesaver for me, I remembered what happened. And it's a weird experience to go from having just like one core memory of something and like weird feeling inclinations of something, and then having your mind fully reveal it. I've doubted myself at times, but I know that the feeling I feel in my body when I uncovered this memory, and when I process it and think about it, I know that feeling isn't made up. That feeling is real. And it was by no means the severe sexual trauma that happened to me later, but it was still inappropriate. And, it was inappropriate. It was a lot of inappropriate exposure to me as a small child at that age between me and my preschool teacher. And so I think that's why I became fascinated with the body at that age, and started initiating those things. The severe sexual assault that happened when I was 7, that I completely had blocked out. So in North Carolina, we lived in this apartment complex, and there, again, socially, I was not super popular by any means. But there was a group of brothers that I played with occasionally, and they had like a sister, and they were like our next door neighbor. And so like neighbors make their kids play together. And there was these woods behind the complex, and I remember us all going out there several times. And there was like a rope swing, and it was kind of like our fort. But I have this memory, and I've had it forever, of me and the older brother going into the woods alone. And then the next memory after that is just me coming out. And again, like, I never thought anything of it. Until last summer, I was in rehab again for like the 24th time. And I was doing EMDR, which is a type of trauma therapy that helps you reprocess traumas that are held in your body. And I was in one memory about something else, and then all of a sudden, I was there in the woods. The boy was right there. The older brother was right there. I was like reliving the whole thing, and I was being forced on the ground and brutally assaulted. And I was raped that day. I completely disassociated from it. blocked it out, you know? I do find it interesting, though, simply because if I look at my path as a sexual being, and I look at my path as an addict, and I look at the traumas from my childhood, I clearly see the correlation between all of them. The number of times I've put myself in dangerous sexual scenarios high on meth that were violent, aggressive, dangerous, it's too numerous to count. And I think it was like my subconscious way of trying to process what had happened as a child before my conscious mind knowing that any of that had happened. I've been using crystal meth. Let's see here. You know, in 2009, I tried it for the first time. And then my stepfather was hit and killed by a car. And that became a coping thing for me for a while, escaping into like crystal meth. I would use for a few days, come out, not touch it for a while, try to show up for my mom, who was completely devastated and like imploding from the pain of losing the man she considered her soulmate, dealing with my adopted sisters. We had 3, in the marriage between my stepdad and my mom, they adopted 3 different girls, 2 of which are blood sisters. They got them at different times. And then my friend Jordan, who I went to high school with, needed a place to live, and we brought her in. But yeah, you know, my dad dying, David, my stepfather dying, you know, it's not just like a doctor dying. It's not just a husband dying. It's not just a father dying or a brother dying. It's like our whole family died. Everything that I knew to be our family unit and our structure of living was shattered. And I didn't know how to cope, you know? And I had done this substance that gave me relief from all the shit that I had buried my whole life and gave me a way to escape and express myself. And so between trying to pick my mom up off the floor, keep my sister safe, and manage my own internal shit, going to crystal meth was a welcomed escape. And it's something that happened semi-regularly for, since 2009. Sometimes the relapses would last longer than others. Sometimes it would be a night, and then, you know, I wouldn't do it. And I always ended up going back to trying to be sober. Always trying to go back to like my family. Always trying to go back to some semblance of like what it means to be Cameron. You know, I have this tendency to live, as I think everyone does, but to live in this world of black and whites. And so it's like, when I use crystal meth, when I shoot crystal meth, when I'm having chemsex, when I'm doing these things, it allows me to live in this darkness void of any light. And it's a darkness that I get so scared of touching and so scared of being consumed by that when I get sober, inevitably, I always know I'm gonna get sober. Because for me, I am not the type of drug addict that can function using crystal meth. I throw out my job, I throw out my relationships, I throw out any semblance of a life so that I can have sex and be high. And so when I get sober and I see that light inside of me come back on and people are noticing it and I'm feeling healthy again, all I want to do is push that darkness away because it scares me so much. It scares me so much. And I think living in that crazy juxtaposition is one of the things that have perpetuated my drug cycle for so long. You know, I'm currently at, I honestly don't know what number it is. You know, last time I counted up the number of rehabs and programs I'd been to, it was in the 20s. And I know that sounds really nonchalant, but at some point, I kind of have to have this attitude of like, well, at least I keep trying, you know? 'Cause some people don't. They either give up completely or they die or they don't get the opportunities that I have gotten and the grace that I have been given by my loved ones, by God, by the universe. Like, not everyone has the chances I have had, and I recognize that. But yeah, I mean, I've been to tons of treatment centers. I successfully completed most of them, but none of them went past like 45, 50 days. I tried a few long-term treatment programs that were focused on behavioral modification. Things that like, you know, involve shaving your head and making you carry a toilet seat around your neck, squat and cough, you know, wearing scrubs, not being able to talk, them putting you in a room and yelling at you about what a piece of shit you are. And like, that's not what makes me want to be sober. So, you know, the times I tried to do those programs, I left pretty quickly. I tried to go to one of those in Hawaii. They made me close my bank account. They made me leave my cell phone and get on a plane, and they picked me up, and 3 days later, because I knew by the way that I just was being treated in 72 hours that it was not for me. And I had to beg them to let me call my mom so I could go home. And my mom didn't believe me. She thought I was full of shit. But they dropped me off at the Honolulu airport with no money, no phone, no ticket. And I had to like survive and figure a way to get home. You know, whatever. I mean, my point in all of that is I've tried everything. And I've done 12-step and I've done therapy. And that demon that is crystal meth and IV use and sex continues to haunt me. You know, I have almost 5 months sober. I just got 4 months about 2.5 weeks ago. I'm in a program currently that I won't mention the name of, but it's a long-term program, and its focus is around community and spirituality and reigniting your passions and discovering who you are. You know, I think one of the big things that I've struggled with, you know, especially coming from a background where my birth father was so dogmatic and so just insanely like religious, to the point where like when my mom divorced him, he tried to give us an exorcism. You know, I think I've kind of had this knowing of God, this understanding of God, a belief in God, especially as I got older and found my own concept of God, but I've never had faith in God. You know, I've never believed fully that, you know, God would have my back or that I could be sober by putting my life into God's hands. But something's been happening, you know, in this new experience and in this new recovery where I keep getting tested by situations, and I just keep choosing to trust the process and stay. And I'm feeling really hopeful. I haven't felt hopeful in a long time.
That's great.
Yeah.
So you are a drag queen. You became a drag queen at what age?
So COVID hit, and I was in a sober living, and I've been laid off from my job, and I just decided, you know, that I was going to take the curiosity and the desire to learn drag and put it into action. I had all this free time and a place to do it that felt safe. And so in 2020, summer of 2020, I started practicing my makeup. And then by November of that year, I moved to Denver. I decided I wanted to get out of LA. Everywhere I looked, I saw my crystal meth addiction. Everywhere I looked, I saw like just really painful memories. And I picked Denver because it reminded me of my home state, Alaska, and had a better queer scene than Anchorage did. And I went. And by spring of 2021, I had managed to get myself a job as a part-time drag queen at one of the local bars and bartending there. And, I put every ounce of creative power I had into it for the last 3 years. So it's been a journey. I love it. It's one aspect of who I am. And I will continue to do it the rest of my life because it gives me a way to express myself and be a storyteller. And it also brings joy to people's lives. And ultimately, connecting with people and making them smile is important to me, and getting to be fabulous while doing it, why not?
So what age were you when you discovered that drag was something that you were interested in, being in drag?
I would say my earliest memory of putting on feminine clothing and playing make-believe, I would have been about 7, 6. I was living in North Carolina with my family, and there's this dress my mom had. It was this crushed velvet, maroon colored dress and one of those 90s blossom bucket hats. And I would just run around the garage and hop over things, pretending I was this super secret agent spy, but I don't know, I just idolized powerful feminine women. And that was the make-believe, that was the fantasy. And then I did theater. I grew up doing plays, and that was really my outlet at first. I was a really awkward, overweight, shy, confused young child. And finding theater, finding the ability to express myself saved my life. So in theater, I think the first time I did drag, I was in a play called The Road to Kyoto. It was a kabuki-style show, and I was playing a monk, but one of the geishas dropped out of the show, and me and all my 10-year-old glory was I'll do it, and so I did. And then after that, I went to performing arts high school at one point, and we did a showcase where I played Edna from Hairspray. And I remember them giving me the costume and me thinking, this is not enough. This is not fabulous enough. But I didn't really know how to make it better, so I just actually stuffed the bra with some grapefruit and did my best to embody Harvey Firestein and sell it with what they were giving me. And then I would say drag, this concept of drag that we have today. I mean, really, I owe discovering it to Drag Race and RuPaul and all of that. And of course, exploring gay bars in my early 20s and seeing them out and about. They always just fascinated me. And that was definitely the first time I was I want to do that to that level.
But for some men, they're attracted to big, dynamic women like yourself. But you want to be one. Why do you think that is, that you want to be one rather than just hang around them?
So for me, it's not that I want to be a woman. I remember at a very young age, I told my mother, I think I was about 3, feeling very different and feeling out of place with male peers and male adults, and telling my mom, I feel like a girl trapped in a boy's body. Now, in the concept of transitioning today and what it means to be trans and be in the wrong body, I could see how looking at that 3-year-old self saying that that could potentially be my story. But really, for me, it's not that I want to be a woman. It's that I feel and honor the femininity within me, as well as the masculinity within me. It's a both and for me. I'm not one or the other. My soul is both male and female. I identify as gender fluid, but this particular expression of Cameron is known as Elleven DiVine. I am a professional drag queen. And for me, I've modeled my drag off of my mother and like classic, famous pop culture female icons and 90s supermodels. And I don't know, I was raised by women. I was always loved by women better than I was by men. And it just comes from this deep place of respect and liking to feel beautiful and wanting to be every pop star diva fantasy I ever had as a child. But I don't want to necessarily be an actual woman. And that is confusing for some people. I've been in plenty of scenarios dressed up like this, where I flirt and I play and it's after a club gig and, you know, back when I was drinking, you know, maybe I was a little tipsy or, you know, they were definitely tipsy, but, you know, it never got to a point for me where I was like, yes, I'm going to go home with these people and let this be their fantasy. I've definitely taken people home from the bar in full drag, but it always comes off because I feel blessed to have come to a place in my life where the physical form I was born with, I feel comfortable in. And that wasn't always the case.
Is this something you do outside of your performances, dressing up as a woman?
I'll practice it. But no, I don't. First of all, this takes a long time. Much longer than I would like it to, and also much longer than would deem necessary to go to like the grocery store. That being said, in terms of like the traditional cultural like definitions of that is something a man would wear, that is something a woman would wear, I don't really subscribe to. If I want to wear women's clothing to the extent that like, oh, that's a brand of women's jeans, or that's a shirt for a woman, or that's a dress that I altered and made into a tunic for me. Like, I don't care about any of that. But no, like I don't go out in my day-to-day or go on dates or go shopping in Elleven DiVine clothing.
And so you are gay or straight or bi?
That's been a really long road of self-discovery. I'm what I describe or refer to as demi-pansexual. So for me, first and foremost, I have to have an intimate connection to the person. Like they don't need to be my soulmate by any means, but for me to feel, especially sober, you know, for me to feel safe and comfortable enough to explore myself sexually with someone and be aroused and like ejaculate and really like be in the moment, I have to have some level of intimacy with them. Otherwise, I get triggered. So I no longer really participate in random casual hookups. I don't use the traditional like gay apps simply for my safety, for my recovery, and as well because like I've just discovered that like that type of intimate pleasure leaves me feeling worse about myself. And it's in no judgment to other people. Like everyone's different. But my goal is to stop hurting myself with drugs. And I find that when I have that kind of sex, I just want to hurt myself with drugs. So demi and then pansexual, meaning that for me, it's about the person. I don't care what's between your legs. I mean, don't get me wrong. I want what's between your legs, but it's not the defining aspect of my attraction for someone. And that's confusing for a lot of people. Especially when it's paired with you're a drag queen and you're gender fluid. So again, the question is like, do you want to be a woman? Do you not want to be a woman? They never know how to put me in a box and define me. I feel really fortunate to be at a place in my life and gone through enough self-discovery to know who I am and to be okay with people not getting it. And we're also in a really cool, I would say, Renaissance era of gender and pronouns and sexuality, which is fabulous. And it's a kind of a weird timing because of the level of pushback some of it's getting. But that being said, I think these types of people, these souls, this like concept of self-expression has always been there in a lot of us. We just haven't had the words to describe it yet or felt safe enough. And so I'm really happy that we're at that place.
Do you have any regrets? Do you regret not coming out sooner or?
So I do have regrets. I actually, my whole life I was told I was gay. It's interesting to think about kind of the narrative that's in some parts of the country and world where this concept of like queer culture, drag queens, trans people, parents with trans kids, trying to indoctrinate or, raise kids to be gay. Because the truth of the matter is I'm not gay. And my whole life, I was told I was gay by people that weren't in the community, weren't safe adults for me. I mean, if it wasn't my peers, it was their parents. If it wasn't teachers, it was the principal. I once took unicorns to show and tell, and I was going to this like small private Catholic preschool in Anchorage, Alaska, and I got in trouble and put in he wasn't the principal, and I don't think he was like the dean or something, the deacon, I don't know. I'm not religious, but I got put in the office and overheard them calling my father, who wasn't in the picture, saying, "Your son's gay, he's gonna infect the other children, we need you to come handle this." And then I found out later that my dad took my mom to court again over me because of this. So I have always known that I was different. People have told me I was different. I felt different. And so when it became a thing about like discovering my body in my teens, it was coming from a place of like some intense sexual trauma as a child that I was unaware of. I had disassociated and blocked it out. And immense pressure to like be gay because that's what I thought I was. And also this deep fear that I was gay because I associated being gay with people going to like make fun of me or belittle me because that's always how it sounded when I was told I was gay. "Oh, you're gay. Oh, you're gay. He's gay." So it was just a really convoluted concept in my mind. But, at 12, 13, I definitely started having those physical urges, and it was right around that time that AOL had popped up, and you give at that point we were living in Minnesota, you give some confused little queer boy access to the internet, they're gonna find trouble, and I did. And it was behavior that led me all through my teens into my early adult years, which eventually led me to crystal meth.
How did your family handle all of this?
So, my biological father, who really wasn't in the picture, he was more of like, I don't know, it was like an obligatory like role, right? Like he gave the semen, he was there when she gave birth, but the truth is he was never really a father to me. We would try to pretend that he was, but ultimately my father was my stepfather. My mom met him when she was his ultrasound technician in Providence Hospital in Anchorage, Alaska, and they had this wild affair and fell in love, and he became my dad. And he always loved me for me. I feel really blessed about that. But, like I said, it was always a thing, Cameron's gay. So, the first person I had consensual sex with was my best friend. And we gotten really stoned, and it was like that really cheesy, like we started tickling each other, and the next thing I know, other things are happening, and then, we go to bed, we wake up, he leaves to go back home, and I go downstairs to my parents who are having coffee and reading the paper. I'm like, "Mom, Dad, you know how I've been wondering if I'm gay?" And they're like, "Mm-hmm." Like, "Well, me and Steven had sex last night, and I hated it, so I'm definitely not gay." And their response was, my dad basically pulled his paper down out of his face and was like, "Just be safe. We love you." And my mom said, "Just give me grandchildren. I love you." So it was always just love from them, which is fortunate because socially outside of my family, that wasn't the case. And from my biological father, it was always, we're praying for your salvation. We're praying for Cameron's soul.
You were born this way?
Well, yeah, that's an interesting question. It's like the chicken or the egg. Are we born gay? Is it nurture? Is it nature? I don't know if I have the answer for that.
So the sexual abuse you went through when you were a young boy, mm-hmm. Do you think that played a role in all of this?
I think, like any traumatic experience that someone survives, it can't not play a part in who they become. For me, my first addiction ever was fantasy, then food, and my mother's love. And so, yeah, do I think that, being brutally raped in the woods next to our apartment building in North Carolina led to me putting on my mother's dress and being a top secret agent spy in the garage? Yeah, I do. Because it made me feel powerful and it helped me escape. I don't feel like because it was with a guy who did that to me and because I do have sex with men, that's why I do drag exclusively. But I do think there's a correlation there. Much like how I can see that the confusing time, of like my first love and losing my virginity, to my best friend and AOL, and then him like disappearing on me and like icing me out and me not having an outlet to turn to turned me into like looking for things online, which all snowballed into my addiction later in life. Everything's connected.
And tell me about your journey with drugs.
My very first experience with like being high was with Steven, before we ever had sex. Again, like socially, I wasn't very cool. And he just thought I was cool. Like I had been having trouble in school and kept starting new schools because of it. And when I ended up at the elementary or middle school he was at, I was doing these anime characters and drawing them, and I drew him and his skater friends as little anime cartoons, and that got me in the door. And then eventually I got an invite to his house, and we smoked pot. And so drugs for me have always been a way to connect. They helped me get out of myself and out of my discomfort. And, being high and being stoned is definitely connected to the first time I had sex. And so as a young adolescent exploring their body, confused about their sexuality, going in and out of the closet, having the habitual like tendency to find older men online, like I'm talking like dads in minivans picking me up and having sex with me in the middle of the night. It was like an inevitable point in time that I would end up doing harder drugs. At first, my first hard drug really, so I graduated high school in 2005. I got into a private university in New York City for theater and writing. And I went there and I picked up a cocaine addiction. And I didn't go back after Christmas break. Instead, I got my friends heavily addicted to cocaine. And we went on a really hard bender for almost a year until one of us ended up going to rehab. And, we told our parents. And, I remember sitting in cars at like 4 a.m., like coked out of my mind, thinking it was the worst thing in the entire world. And like having this feeling of just total despair and disgust at myself. And I have more recent memories of living in my car, high out of my mind on crystal meth, shooting up for days, and being back in that feeling of the cocaine internally, like that disgust and turmoil, and wishing it had just been cocaine I had been doing at this point. It's been almost 2 decades of binge using IV crystal meth. You know, the first time I ever did it was in, I think, 2008, 2009. I had met someone on good old Craigslist. He offered me ecstasy. And I went to his house in Glendale, and he gave me the ecstasy. And once I started rolling, he whipped out the meth pipe and a little bottle of GHB, and my defenses were down. I actually blacked out and came to in his kitchen being very obscene and him asking me to leave at like 4 a.m. But I was hooked. You know, at that point, like, the beast had been awoken. Meth made all the years of sneaking around sexually not feel like wrong. And it allowed me to have the kind of uninhibited, wild sexual fantasies that almost mirrored the traumatic experiences of my childhood, but in a way that gave me some sense of control, right? Like, you know, I'm putting myself in the situation and it's okay because it's fun and hot, but when really it's not okay. For me, it wasn't, you know. I left his house in Glendale and found someone next to my apartment building using, and went to that person's apartment and did it for a couple days. Didn't touch it for a few months. And it just became a perpetual cycle in my life. I was always honest with my mom about it. It was hard to hide it from her and my best friends. It's been a really rough journey.
Tell me what happens emotionally with this ride you're on.
When I'm high, it emotionally it's like I know the emotions are there because I'm a very emotional centered human being. I can confidently say that my ability to be intuitive about other people's emotions and my own and process them is really high. But when I'm high, I can just shut it off and shut it away. At least I used to be able to. Now coming down from that high, processing the things I had done, the people I had let down, the things I had missed that were important to me, I've been on the floor in a heaping pile of just depression so many times. Suicidal from it, just completely devastated and lost, and hopeless. I know what hopelessness feels like. And it's one of the worst places to be internally, and it's even worse when your external surroundings match that internal feeling.
Would you say you're misunderstood by most people?
Yeah, I would, for a variety of reasons. You know, for me, I have to constantly tell people I'm not gay, which is ridiculous. You know, I get it. Yes, I'm a drag queen. And yes, out of drag, I can have some more flamboyant tendencies sometimes. But people I've known, I know that I live around, work around, hang around, they'll just be like, oh, you're all gay. Well, I'm not. And it wouldn't be a big deal to me, except that it's if I don't correct them, it's a narrative that will continue like it has my whole life to play out. It affects, I feel misunderstood by a lot of women I try to date. I get friend zoned a lot. I feel misunderstood by gay men I try to date. I've literally been in situations when I was using, especially, where I'm doing my best to play the masculine side of Cameron, and I've got the leather and the jockstrap and the high top socks and sneakers and a backwards baseball cap. And I'm like, yeah, whatever. And then because I'm human and I can't lock every part of who I am away at every second of the day, and I've been with these fools for like almost 24, 48 hours, because when you're doing meth, like you're not going anywhere. And I let something slip, or like I'm trying to show them a picture and they see my drag or whatever. And I've literally watched like them go from, he's so hot, to, wait, she's a drag? Wait, and then they're not attracted to me anymore. When 2 seconds prior to them knowing this bit of information about me, I was hot to them. Which really just speaks to their own internalized homophobia and their own shit. But that being said, you know, I used to do crystal meth to feel sexy and have this fantasy and make up some semblance of who I was, because I didn't know who I was. Now at 37 years old, through everything I've been through, I have a better understanding of who I am. And so when I relapse, you know, in the recent, past 2 years when I've relapsed, and I try to put myself back in this fucking box for these people, I can't do it. It suffocates me. So yeah, I feel misunderstood by the tweaker community. I feel misunderstood by the sober community because I am such a chronic relapser. I get a lot of love from them too. Don't get me wrong. Like, you know, I am not a quitter in both ways. You know, it's like I can't seem to quit the drugs, but I'm also not quitting trying to get sober. And that tenacity that I have to better my life, I know they see and respect that. But yeah, being labeled a chronic relapser and sort of you know, the time game, when are they going to relapse again? That feels like being misunderstood. I feel misunderstood when it comes to my pronouns, which, you know, for me, in drag, she, her, that bitch, whatever. Out of drag, for me, it's they, them, he, him, he, her. For me, because I believe my soul is all-encompassing, as long as you come at me with respect, we're good. Not everyone gets that. Some people in the queer and in the trans and in the non-binary community don't get that. They think I have to decide. You know, I remember working at a gay bar in Denver. You know, I had just started doing drag professionally. I was bartending behind the bar, and so it was such a dichotomy, right? You know, one night I'm on stage, flipping my hair and grinding on, you know, gays for cash, and then the next night I'm behind the bar shirtless with a cowboy hat on. And I remember talking to another local entertainer who identifies as trans, and talking about a local show, and her going, "Oh, but it's for trans and non-binary people only." And granted, I was presenting very masculine at that moment, but I looked at her and I was like, I actually identify as gender fluid. You know, is it something I could do? And I saw her face go from, this is a cute boy, to, who does this person think they are, trying to identify when they clearly look a certain way? Granted, those words never came out of her mouth, and as a good alcoholic, I probably overanalyzed all of that, but that's how I felt. So I felt misunderstood most of my life, even by myself.
What would you say is your greatest strength?
Well, I'm definitely persistent. I would say my greatest strength is my ability to see the good in people. My ability to offer love and trust to people I don't know. It's gotten me in a lot of fucked up situations, but I would rather come at this world with a loving, open heart than let any of the trauma I've experienced, any of the stuff I've gone through, shut that heart down. I believe we're on this planet to love each other, learn to give and receive love, and just be in harmony. And I know it's a stupid utopian thought that feels almost impossible, especially with what's happening all over the world right now. But to me, my capacity to love is my greatest gift. And like I said, I'm a survivor, I'm a fighter. I'm gonna keep pushing for my dreams and goals. I know exactly what I wanna do, who I wanna be, who I am, and what I'm capable of. And I used to have this story in my head that I was lazy. I've let other people's stories about my talents, that they're not enough or not good enough, get to me sometimes. I've let other people's opinions, other people's successes, other people's failures dictate and control my perception of myself and what I think and know I'm capable of. And I feel like I'm at a point in my life where I'm done doing that.
Do you have friends?
Do I have friends? Yes, I have friends. I have a very small group of friends that I've had a long time.
That's all you need.
Yeah. I've learned that if I feel like I'm watering the garden too much and the plants aren't growing, I'm gonna get out of the garden. I don't like feeling used. And I don't need to do that. Like, you either want to be in my life, you either love me or at least respect and like me enough to put effort into something, or you don't, and that's okay. We don't have to like everyone. I'm not everyone's cup of tea, and that's okay.
You're still young yet, but do you fear getting old?
Yes, I do. I'm young. Like, I know it's all relative, right? It's all perspective. I'm 37. I feel like I was 6 years old yesterday. Like, it's crazy how fast it flies, especially when I compare it to like before crystal meth, like after crystal meth, high school, college, before my dad died, after my dad died. It's just like when it's broken into these periods of time and I look back on how quickly it went by and also how long it's actually been, especially when it comes to my using. I was in a rehab last summer and we were like counting up our like years of use. And I was like, well, and then it hit me. I've been doing crystal meth for 18 fucking years. 18 years.
Did you feel like you wasted those years? Or did you have a lot of fun?
Was there fun? Yes. But I'll say this, one thing that I have to remind myself, because it's not fun anymore. It's one, what they're putting in crystal meth now is not the crystal meth I was doing 10 years ago. It's not. It's killing people. And it's also affecting the brain differently. They actually are changing the process in the way in which they make the meth now so that it makes you crazier faster and it's more addictive. And it was already addictive to begin with. So like now, I can be completely, like one of the relapses I had earlier this year, I was stone cold sober for maybe 2 months and working a program, and then made the dumb choice to relapse, went to the person's house, put it in my veins, and I instantly, I felt a shift, right? I put something in my body, but I just knew, like, it's not working anymore. And whether it's because the drugs are bad now, or whether it's because I've got almost 20 years of 12-step and rehab and therapy chirping in my brain, or whether it's because I've come to a place about who I am internally and how I want to value myself externally, whatever the reason is, the drugs don't work anymore. I get, I've never been someone that's like, is someone out there? Is that the FBI? Oh my God, that helicopter. Oh, shadow people. It's never been my jam. But my psychosis, my crazy is they don't want you here. You're not good enough to be here. They think you're weird. And it's just my voice telling me all these very hurtful, hateful things about the situation I'm in. And then me getting, of course, externally weird and awkward and being like, you guys not want me here? which, it's just a horrible perpetual cycle of self-internalized destruction.
All right. Divine 11?
Elleven DiVine.
Elleven DiVine.
Spelled with 2 L's.
Thank you so much for sharing your story.
Thank you.
And I wish you lots of luck.